My agenda today is again starting with the first, as we discussed, like we have these 6 topics to cover today, and so we'll start with the what is PIMS and what is this 27701. So the PIMS is basically a privacy information management system. It's a short form of privacy information management system. In short, we call it as a PIMS, and it's a any management system, right? Whether it is a quality management system, information security management system, business continuity management system, any management system is basically a framework, set of policy and processes which defines your practices so that the things are managed and controlled and aligned with the business objectives. That's the intent of creating a management system. So this particular management system is focused on privacy information. So all the privacy compliances, what we need to make sure that we have the compliances with the local regulations, with the contractual requirements. If we have branch offices in different countries, so those branch offices may need to comply with more regulations, means other than the what the headquarters is need to comply with. But all those requirements we have to fulfill. So we need to have a managed system that we meet all those requirements. That's what the privacy information management system is. And ISO 27001 is a standard which defines this framework, means which defines the requirement, defines the path, what you can follow to establish, implement, maintain, and constantly improve the privacy information management system. Means if you follow the ISO 27701, you will have the global best practices of privacy information management in place, along with your legal, regulatory, contractual, and business requirements getting fulfilled out of this entire framework. So it builds a data privacy program into the organization. Then how it is different from your regulations, fine. So we have, like, we hear a lot about DPDP Act and the GDPR, fine, and now we have 27701. How it relates and what's the difference? So basically, DPDP Act and GDPR are the regulatory requirements, fine, means it's a law. It's not a certification, fine. It's a law that you have to comply with, fine, no matter which system you follow, no matter how you comply with it, but they have given specific requirements that you have to comply with. And this is what you expected is that you meet the compliance requirements. Means there is nobody will come and give a certification, yes, you are GDPR compliant or DPDP compliant. It's a law that you have to comply with at all times. So 27701 helps you implementing this compliance, basically. Fine. Helps you implementing this compliance and helps you establish or give it something concrete to your customer, to your board, that says, okay, yes, I'm certified. So, and if I'm certified, that means I'm following all the best practice, the global best practices, and I'm meeting my legal requirements. So the 27701 is basically is a certification standard. If you are DPDP compliant, right, how you will present it to your customers, how you will present it to your board, right? So if you have a certification, right, that is a evidence that I have done the right thing and I have been evaluated independently and I have got the certification. And this certification includes, every ISO certification includes that you have to meet your legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements of that particular domain. Now here we are talking about the data privacy, fine. So this is standard for data privacy. So if you get certified on 27701, fine, that proves that you have met all your legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements for data privacy, and also you have established a data privacy program with the globally accepted best practices defined or given by the ISO standard. And that's how it relates to it. Right? So 27701, if you're implementing, you have to comply with legal requirements. But if you comply with only your legal requirements, that does not guarantee that you have the best practices, all what is like matching with the global, the industry benchmarks. Right? So that's the difference basically. Then how it relates and differs with the 27001. Moving to the next section, how it relates and how it differs from the 27001, which is already in market since more than 20 years. Fine. So 27001 talks about protecting data. It can be business data, it can be your personal data. Fine. It is not specifically talking about protecting personal data. Fine. Earlier, if you look at the lower half where the ISO standard is given, earlier 27701 2019 version was an extension to 27001. But now with the 2025 version, this is an independent standard means without going for 27001 certification, you can directly take 27701 certification as well. Fine. Earlier, with the 2019 version of 27701, it was a requirement that you have to follow 27001, and there was requirement for extended with 27701, means 27701 was an extension to 27001, but now it's no longer the case. Fine. You can very well, means these two are independent standards now, and you can get certified on either of them or both of them. Fine. You can pick any of them and you can get certified depending on what your use case is. So 27701 is no longer dependent on 27701. Coming to the structure of the standard, how the standard is. So the standard and any other ISO standards, ISO management system standards, fine, they call this MSS, ISO management system standards. They utilize the plan, do, check, and act framework. Fine. So this is the methodology of, means we have to plan something, implement, do means implement that thing. Then we have to evaluate, means check that how well we have implemented it, how effectively it is working, and then we have to act upon it, means we have to make the improvements. That's a continuous improvement cycle basically. So all ISO management system standards are following the plan, do, check, and act cycle, where we have the 10 clauses framework, and which 10 clauses are standard across all management systems. So these are those 10 clauses. Clause 1 to clause 10, this is all same in all ISO management system standards, whether it is BCMS, ISMS, PIMS, ITSM, whatever. Fine. So this is common across all standards, even the quality management system as well. Fine. So the first clause talks about scope, normative references, and terms and definitions. Clause 4 to clause 10 are the important clauses that we have to, that sets the requirements. But the topics are same. Context of the organization will remain same, whether it is ISMS, PIMS, BCMS, or whatever. Fine. Leadership, planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, and improvement. So these topics, these clauses will remain same. The content will address the specific topic. Fine. In the when, let's say, when we talk about the context of the organization, we'll identify the internal external issues with respect to data privacy in 27701. Fine. With respect to information security in the 27001, fine, which is ISMS. With respect to business continuity in the 22301, which is BCMS. Fine. So here comes that you need to meet, means if you have the legal requirement, the DPDP Act, fine. So here in the very first clause, first implementable clause, when clause 1 to 3 are the just general terms and definition and all. So what we need to implement, what sets the management system is a clause 4 to clause 10. Fine. So in the very first clause, it is they are saying that you have to identify all your legal, regulatory, contextual requirements. So here the standard mandates you to follow your law. Fine. If your DPDP is applicable to you, then you have to follow that law. But unless you follow that law, fine, your first clause, clause 4, is not fulfilled. Fine. So this is how this 27701 integrates with your legal requirements. Fine. So if I go to the next slide, so this clause 4 to clause 10 sets the, these are the implementable clauses. Fine. Clause 1 is just a scope of the standard. Clause 2 is the normative references, and clause 3 is the terms and definitions. Clause 4 to clause 10 are the implementable clauses, and these sets the requirements that if you want to get certified on any ISO standard, you have to fulfill all requirements given in clause 4 to clause 10. Fine. So, and the clause 4 itself says you have to identify all your internal, external issues, your stakeholders, and the scope of the management system. So the stakeholders here is, the government is also a stakeholder. The regulatory body is also a stakeholder. If the regulatory body has given a regulation in terms of GDPR or in terms of DPDP, that is what they're expecting you to follow. Fine. So when we identify the needs and expectations of interested parties, so that becomes your needs and expectations, means our regulatory body expects us to follow DPDP Act, expect us to follow GDPR Act, fine, GDPR regulation. So that sets that's how it integrates the legal requirements into the standard. So this ISO covers, see, data privacy and like how, again, if I go back to this previous slide, right? So the differences in 27001 and 27701 is the controls when it comes to data protection, fine, will remain same. If you have to apply access control, you have to apply access control in both cases, because the access to the data need to be controlled, fine. So now when it comes to information security management system, it talks about that we have to apply the logical access control, physical access control for the sensitive data. But here in 27701, that sensitive data is limited to personal data only. Fine. So means we are focused only on personal data, but not the otherwise. Fine. when it comes to setting, if you don't have a background in the security, fine, the management systems are defined in a way like many people from the compliance background, means the quality management or other management systems, they also opt for 27701 or 27001. When because if you belong to a compliance department, sometimes the organizations put all the compliances in one bucket, fine, and the one department has to meet all the compliance requirements, fine, irrespective of whether it is security, privacy, business continuity, because then they create a one unified integrated management system which has the quality management system, your security management system, fine, maybe data privacy management system as well. All this is integrated, means you don't have to create multiple set of documents in isolation. You can integrate because the structure is also same. If you see the structure is same, fine. When the structure is same, when you're defining the context of the organization, in the same context, you identify your legal requirements in terms of data privacy, your legal requirement in terms of information security, your contractual requirement in terms of quality management system as well. Fine. So and this is supported. Even the certification body also supports that you can have a one common integrated management system where you save a lot of cost when you go for certification. Fine. So that is very much doable. Now then coming to the controls, fine. So access control, fine, it need to be there in the for the data privacy as well for information security, fine. But as a compliance officer, you are not supposed to implement that access control. You need to just understand what the access control is so that you can do the audit, fine. So we'll see that in the coming slides what this the clause 4 to clause 10 requirements are. That probably you will realize that there is no technical controls in this clause 4 to clause 10. Okay, so coming to PDCA again, plan, do, check, and act cycle. Fine. So when we say that this is a methodology, plan, do, check, is a methodology, and these are the clauses. Fine. So out of this, clause 4 to clause 10 is the implementable clauses. So we are distributing these clauses into the plan, do, check, and act cycles. So clause 4, 5, 6, 7 sets the planning phase of PDCA. Clause 8 is the execution. Clause 9 is the evaluation, and clause 10 is a continual improvement. Fine. So this is how it is defined as a clause plan, do, check, and act. So clause 4, 5, 6, 7 of the standard defines how you will implement your data privacy program or privacy information management system. Fine. And clause 8 will say what you have planned, you have to execute now. In the clause 9, you have to evaluate how well you implemented. In the clause 10, if in the clause 9 you identify the gaps, okay, how you can further improve it, or maybe some of the requirements are not fulfilled, some of the implementation is not appropriately made. Fine. In that clause 10, you make the improvements and you identify the root cause and fix those improvements. Fine. Means fix those, take those actions. So that becomes the continual improvement. So the plan to check act of this PDCA in the if you compare with the ISO standards, clause 4, 5, 6, 7 is planning, 8 is do, 9 is check, and 10 is act. So standard itself does not write anywhere these days that this is a PDCA base. So if you look at the 2005 version of 27001, in that case they used to define PDCA and all, but now they do not say that it's based on PDCA, but inherently it is following the same methodology. Fine, and this is how they have defined the structure of the ISO standards. Okay, coming to clause 4. Fine, here it comes. Like with the again given the same answer again, all your legal, regulatory, contractual requirements, fine, has to be complied with, has to be understood and integrated into your privacy information management system. This is the gist of the context of the organization. Now the context of the organization means every organization is different. Fine, you might be a data controller, you might be a significant data fiduciary, you might be just maybe a processor. Fine. So whatever your role is in this particular domain, that has to be understood. Fine. This is what this and what are the requirements that apply to you in terms of data privacy. Fine. That has to be understood before we define the scope of the privacy information management system. Fine. If you have a customer which gives you the contractual requirement to meet the some of the data privacy like controls, fine. But if you exclude that into your implementation, fine. Probably when you do the scoping, there are multiple specifics that we have to take care of. We may exclude from the certification, but we may not exclude meeting the requirement because it's a contractual requirement you have to fulfill. Otherwise, you lose the contract. Fine. So whether you want to address that contractual requirement with the help of this PIMS or not, fine, that you make the decision, and accordingly you set the scope of the PIMS. Fine. So here your legal, regulatory, contractual, and business requirements will come into play, and you have to understand, document it. Documentation is not every document is mandatory in the ISO standards, but it is good to document so that you can review, you can evaluate, and you can basically refer to it what all your requirements are. You need to integrate those requirements into your practices. Fine. And unless you document it, you just understand and don't document it, fine, you are probably not able to make the communication well. Find that what all you need to meet. Fine. Probably till the time you are managing the system, well, you will know all the requirements. But if somebody else is also assisting you, or if you leave the organization, somebody else into your place, fine, then they will have to probably struggle with how like you have met those, how like you have came to those requirements. So it is good to document wherever the different eyeballs are looking at the same process. Fine. Our different hands up probably following the same process, means carrying out a particular activity. Fine. So this will lead to inconsistencies. To avoid the inconsistencies, we recommend that you document those requirements as well. Though ISO standard does not say that everything has to be documented, in this particular context of the organization, ISO standard only says the scope need to be documented. Fine. And in the ISO standards, it is specifically written, this need to be retained as documented information. This is the language they use. That scope need to be retained as documented information. Fine. So they do not say that organization context has to be retained as a documented information. Fine. So that documentation is not mandatory, but it is good to document it so that you can connect the dots yourself. Fine. And it becomes easy for you to understand, easy for somebody else who will come into your place in future. Fine. They will also be able to connect the dots. So in the context of the organization, we are identifying the requirements and setting the scope of implementing PIMS. Then we comes to the leadership. Without leadership sponsorship or sponsoring or support, fine, it's very difficult to move in any organization. Fine, to put any new project into place. Fine, so we have to work with the leadership. Fine, and this leadership is not always CEO. This leadership is a leadership as per the scope. If your scope is particular department that you are implementing PIMS in, let's say, one particular branch office and one particular business unit, fine, then leadership of that particular branch, that particular business unit is the leadership here. Fine, it is not always board, it's not always CEO. Fine. So in the small organizations, the things are very easy. You can reach out to CEO anytime. Fine. In the large organizations, fine, it is very difficult to get the time from the CEO. So how you'll explain to them what you're doing, how you present what your status of the PIMS is, it becomes very challenging. So here leadership is not, that's why they're not using the term the C-suite officers. Fine. They're not using the term the board of directors. They're not using the term CEO or COO. Fine. They're using the term leadership. Whatever the context you have defined, whatever the scope you have defined, whosoever is the leader in the leadership position of that particular scope, that is the person we are referring to here. Fine. They need to support you. They need to ensure that the privacy policy is in place, and the privacy policy is communicated. Its importance is also communicated, so that everyone is aligned when it comes to implementing the controls, implementing the practices, changing the process, the practice of the organization. Whenever you implement bring up any new policy, new process, when that's a change in the organization, unless the other business units support you, you will not be able to make those changes. Fine. To have the support of other business units, when you require first the support of leadership, if they will communicate, everyone will listen. Fine. Otherwise, in the organizations, practically every single department has their own priorities. Fine. They may support you, they may not support you practically. Fine. So other than that, we need to define the roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Means who is responsible, who will work as a the point of contact for privacy, who will because privacy has some level of security as well. If you yourself is not into the security domain, fine, and then somebody else will be in the security domain. Then in the roles and responsibilities, will define data privacy has two aspects. One is the collection and processing of personal data, and second is the protection of personal data. Fine. So probably you will limit yourself to the collection and processing of personal data, but you will not probably get into the protection of personal data. If you are don't have the security background, somebody else will have the security background in the organization. Then you have to clearly define the roles and responsibilities, that this is the part I take care of it, and this is the part that my security officer will take care of. Fine. So that has to be defined. So this is where we define, okay, that who will do what. Fine. And which also sets your boundaries and also assigns the responsibility to the other business units. Fine. So this probably answers your question as well. If you don't have a security background, fine. So doesn't matter if you had from the compliance background or if you want to only data privacy, fine. You will not be, if you are not having security background, you will not be engaged in implementing those security controls, fine. In the organization, they will have somebody else who will be implementing those security controls, fine. So in that case, you have to work in coordination with them. You have to make them understand or have to understand, like communicate well, so that you are able to pass the right message, that what need to be protected to what extent, fine, and what are the exceptions we can allow, or what is the process of the exception, whether it will have, you want to give them the complete authority to approve the exception, or you want to have your involvement into the decision making and decision and approving the exceptions. All those things you have to define, and so that we can work in coordination, so there's no conflicts later on. Then the clause 6 talks about the planning. In this planning, basically what we do is we identify all the risk what can happen to the personal data in my organization. Fine. So first we define the risk assessment process, risk treatment process. Fine. In this particular phase, because this is a planning phase, we are only identifying the process. We are only defining the process of risk assessment and risk treatment. We are not actually carrying out the risk assessment here. Means we are planning, we are identifying, okay, how I will do the risk assessment. If I identify this, what will be my way of treating the risk? Fine. This is what we do in this phase. In the clause 8, when it comes to execution, means the do part, fine, they will do the risk assessment. Fine. So in this phase, we identify the risk. We define the risk assessment process, and that how we will identify the risk. Fine. And then we define the objectives, what we are trying to achieve out of this PIMS. Fine. So what we are trying to achieve is compliance with GDPR, compliance with DPDP Act, compliance with contractual requirement. That becomes my objectives. Fine. This again here it is integrating with the law. Fine. If the DPDP Act is applicable to you, here in the one of the objective will be to comply with the DPDP Act. Fine. And how you plan to achieve it. Fine. So this again is an integration of the ISO standard with your law. Fine. And if there's any changes need to be made in the risk assessment process, in the entire definition of PIMS, that has to be again planned. So there's some sort of change management has to be implemented there as well. Means you cannot make change once the PIMS is defined. You cannot change the PIMS just in a abrupt way. Fine. You have to plan for that changes also. That whatever the change you want to make in the PIMS, fine, that has to be thoughtful, that has to be formally documented, approved, so that you don't make blunders when you're making the changes, when you don't get non-compliant. Then in the clause 7, so in the clause 6, basically we have identified the treatment options, the objectives, and the planning to achieve them. But how you'll achieve it? You need a support. You need the resources to implement anything. And resources need to be competent. I need to define, okay, what is the qualification, experience, or the skills you want from the people who you are assigning the particular roles to. Fine. If you are defining a role of a privacy officer, fine. What is the expectation? Do you expect him to be a security expert? Do you expect him to be a legal expert? Or do you expect him to be just a privacy expert? Fine. So that you need to define as a competence. Fine. What is the competence needed for someone who will do the audit in your organization? What is the competence needed for someone who will implement the security controls in the organization? Fine. So all this competence has to be defined, and so this is so that you can hire, you can bring in the right set of people with you to implement in the implementation phase. They can help in the implementing the PIMS. Then awareness, what the PIMS is. Before we implement, we have to make people aware of that this is something what the PIMS is. This is what their role is in the PIMS. This is the importance of PIMS. And if they do not follow and they do not contribute to the implementation of PIMS, what can be the consequences to the organization, fine, to the probably their position, fine. So both we can define, fine. So basically it talks about the organization, but there's another control about disciplinary action policy, fine. So that basically if somebody is willfully violating the policies, fine, then you basically carry out the disciplinary action process. But in the awareness, you basically have to make sure that what is the importance of PIMS for the organization, what is the role the people play, and this has to be role specific because each department will have different role in the PIMS, and what is the role the people will play in this PIMS, and what if they do not fulfill their requirements, right? So then what will be the implication of not following or not implementing or not fulfilling their responsibilities for the PIMS, right? That's what we define in the awareness. Then communication plan, we have to define the communication, what all need to be communicated. For example, policy need to be communicated, fine, with all my staff members, fine. So objectives need to be communicated, fine. If there's an internal audit, the results need to be communicated. So what I will communicate, with whom I will communicate, when I will communicate, what will be the method of communication, fine, that we define. So that we are, again, we are in the planning phase. So once we'll release the policy, fine, we'll have to make that communication, fine. So we should know, now I have a policy which is approved by the management, what I need to do with this, fine, to whom I need to communicate, fine. And then what all information I need to maintain as a documented information, I mean, that is 7.5. So that I have to identify. So the standard itself says what need to be maintained as a documented information, fine. So that is a mandatory requirement to get certified. And other than that, also based on the organization specifics, for example, I said that your legal, regulatory, contractual requirements, fine. The standard does not say it has to be documented, but unless you document, how you will ensure that you identified them correctly, fine. And what is the reference point you create, fine, so that you can refer to it, or others can also refer to it. So the standard says the standard is defining certain set of documents which is mandatory to follow, but other documents the organization can decide that they want this document or they do not want, right? For a very small organization, very small organization, fine. For example, just a like 5 or 10 people organization, fine. They can also get certified on PIMS, fine. But probably they do not need that rigorous documentation, fine. But when the organization is large, fine, thousands of people are there, fine. Within a team who is managing the PIMS, there are maybe 5 or 10 people are there, fine. So then you document information will help maintain consistency in implementation. Then coming to the clause 8, which is operations. The very first 8.1 is operational planning and control. Means whatever you have planned for, you have to operationalize your plan now, fine. You have to put that into the operations, fine. And one of the major tasks is identify all your risks and treat all your risks, fine. So that is what the clause 8 says. So clause 8 is basically implementation of what all you have done in clause 4, 5, 6, and 7. Fine. So the clause 4, 5, 6, and 7, we have come up with a certain controls, certain practices, certain policies, processes we have to implement. Fine. So this in the clause 8, we will just roll out those communications and release those processes, policies, so that we can implement those controls. And then clause 9, once you roll out your new set of policies and procedures, fine, and people follow it, fine, certain controls they implement, then you want to know how well they have implemented, how effective their controls, the implementation is, fine. So first 9.1 says you have to define the metrics, means the KPIs, define the KPIs so that you can measure how well you are able to achieve your objectives. Objectives are defined in the clause number 6. The 6.2 defines objectives need to be defined. So in the clause number 9.1, we are defining the KPIs, what can give me a impression of whether how well I'm able to achieve my objectives, fine. Not everything can be measured. Standard also realizes this. And even if we are measuring everything, fine, though it's not a requirement, it's not a recommendation as well, fine. We should never measure everything possible. We should measure what is meaningful, fine. So otherwise also, let's say you are measuring everything, how well your measurement is, fine, whether is measurement adequate, fine, are you measuring correctly, that will be evaluated during the internal audit. That's a 9.2. Fine. And whatever the results of measurement and the audit is, that you have to present to the management, because you started with the leadership. Now the same leadership you have to engage, that says, boss, we requested your involvement into this particular exercise, and this is what we have achieved so far. So you're presenting it back to them. So they also want to know, they are sponsoring you, they're supporting you, fine, to implement something new, fine. They also want to know how well you have implemented it, fine, what is the outcome of it, fine. That's the 9.3 management review. And because when we do the KPIs, some of the KPIs may be failing, some of the KPIs may not be. When the KPI is failing, you have to identify whether you have defined the thresholds too high, which is practically not achievable, fine, or there are genuine concerns that you have to address, fine. Same way, when there's an internal audit, you identify some of the controls are fulfilled, some of the control requirements are not fulfilled, fine. So that calls to the non-conformities, fine. If the audit as a result of the audit, fine, you will have whether the practice you have implemented, fine, is in conformity with the standard or it is in non-conformity with the standard. If it is in non-conformity with the standard, then you have to take the corrective action, fine. The corrective action means you have to fix the gap. Fine. And to fix the gap, you have to do the root cause analysis. That we'll see in the last, there's a further section about it when you explain the audit and the how to deal with the audit findings. So the continual improvement, basically, this sets the continual improvement that you plan, do, check, and then you act upon what you identified as a gap. Fine. That is setting the cycle of a continual improvement. Fine. So this is the clause 10. Other than the clause 4 to clause 10, which is absolute requirement to get certified, fine, the standard has Annex A, fine, in the ISO 27001, which is ISMS, Information Security Management System. There's an Annex A divided in 4 different sections, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, fine, which is 93 controls. Here it is divided in 8.1, 8.2, 8.3. Fine. In 27701 in the Privacy Information Management System standard, they defined the Annex A like the control objectives that the controllers need to implement or need to achieve, the control objectives which the processors need to achieve. And this is basically, if you talk about the 8.1, 8.2, this is setting the data privacy practices, fine, but not the data protection practices, fine. So 8.3 is talking about the data protection for both controllers as well as processors. So here it again overlaps with ISO 27001 standard. Fine, the controls you have in 8.3 are the same controls taken from 27001 ISMS. Fine. So there it talks about access control. Here it also talks about access control. When there talks about cryptography, here it talks about cryptography. There talks about like kind of data classification. Here also talks about data classification, labeling, and all. Fine. So it means the controls of the 8.3 is taken from the ISO 27001 Annex A. Fine. So which is again is overlapping here, but because now the controls are included here itself, they have made it independent from 27001. Fine. So this is how they have now made it independent. Earlier, these controls were not part of 27701. Fine. In the 27701, only the controls in Annex A.1, A.2 were there. Fine, which was the extension to 27001. But now the important controls for the data protection, what is required for the protection of personal data, fine, they have included into the 27701 itself, and now this becomes the independent. Fine. So they say now you no longer need to refer to 27001 for data protection. Fine. So data protection controls required for personal data, they've included here in this standard itself. So this is the change in the from the previous version to the new version. Now the standard has few more additional annexures given to it, fine, which is just a mapping to it. Find the implementation guidance means in 27001 the ISO has released 27001 as a set of requirements, and 27002, if you know ISMS, 27002 defines the code of guidance of implementing the Annex A controls of 27001. So means if you want to know more details about how to implement the Annex A of ISMS standard, you need to buy one more standard, 27002. Fine. It is no longer the case here. They have included the implementation guidance, but is generally not included in 27001. Fine. They have released a separate document, and which is again you need to pay for. Now here they say you need to buy only one document which talks about the requirements as well as the implementation guidance. I mean it's a merger of fine kind of 27001 and 27002. Fine. So but limited to the what are the controls you need for the privacy. So Annex A, this Annex A.3, all the controls given in A.3 are explained in this Annex B. That what are the best practices to implement the access control, what are the best practices to implement cryptography, what are the best practices to implement data classification, data labeling, all this control is given here itself. You don't need to refer any other document. 29100 is a high level principles of data privacy. Fine. So they have mapped the controls of 27701 with the 29100 as well. Now we were referring to DPDPR. DPDP you can very well map to the GDPR as well. So they cannot, the ISO standard cannot map to the all the because every country has their own law, fine, on data privacy law. So they have not done the mapping of DPDP at PDPPL, fine, with all this 27701. So because the mother of all the modern day data privacy regulations is GDPR. So they have given the mapping to GDPR with the 27701 as well. Fine. So if you are able to map your DPDP with GDPR, and you can very well align with the 27701 as well. Fine. So they have given that mapping also. They also given the mapping of 27018, which was a extension or the code of practice of the protection of personal data in the cloud. Fine. So this was the basically the standard extension to, I can say, 27001. So they have given the mapping to this also, and they're mapping to 29151 as well, which is further the code of practice of the implement protecting PII. Right? And because the standard is revised from 27701 2019 version, so they have given a correspondence with the how it relates to the previous version of 27701 as well. So these are additional information. These are not implementable things. This is just additional information for you to have the better understanding of the requirements. Right? So the requirements are basically clause 4 to clause 10. And in the clause 6, basically, when we define the data privacy, like the controls and all, but when we define the risk treatment, we have to create something called as a SOA, statement of applicability. Right? So that is still valid. That was the requirement in 27001. That is still valid here as well. So statement of applicability will be built out of Annex A, A.1, A.2, A.3. Right? So these are the three tables that we will refer to when creating the statement of applicability, SOA. Then second phase is implement the auditing this. What is the audits life cycles? Right? So probably you know the first party, second party, third party audits. First party audits are internal audits. Second party audits are the audit by the customer or auditing a service provider. Right? Means where you have some commercial relationship and you have a contract in place, and you do the audit limited to the contractual requirements. Right? And third party audits are the independent audits. Fine. So when you go for certification, you always go for the independent third party audit. Fine. Means they come with no biases. Fine. And they will to evaluate you against the standard and the organizational requirements. So essential factors, whenever any audit is being conducted, we have to identify the scope. Fine. As we define the scope for the certification, this management system, fine, we define the scope of the audit as well. Fine. Objective of the audit, whether objective is to just see the enhancement or to certify. Fine. For the certification, criteria may be your GDPR, DPDP Act, or the criteria may be 27701. When the criteria is only DPDP Act, then you will not look into clause 4 to clause 10. But when the criteria is 27701, you will look into clause 4 to clause 10, Annex A as well as DPDP, because we have seen the DPDP requirement or your legal requirements are incorporated into the 27701 itself. Fine. So this is how you set the criteria for the audit. Then when we do the audit is done at the three dimensions: intent, implementation, effectiveness. If you do not have a defined policy, fine, or the policy is defined not approved by the management, that does not establishes the intent of the management to implement a PIMS. Fine. But if the policy is defined, policy is approved, but let's say policy is not communicated, so you have the intent, but it is not implemented. Fine. So once the control is also implemented, but the control may not be working effectively. Fine. So that is the effectiveness. Means you have the intent, you are also implementing it, but your implementation is not useful. It's not trying to address your concerns, your risks. Fine. These are three different dimensions we do the audit against. Then this is the entire cycle of the audit. Whenever we do the audit, fine. So audit basically for every single audit, whether it is a first party audit, second party, third party audit, and depending on the level of formality. When first party audits are quite with the lesser formal, we connect with the lesser formalities. Fine. Second party audit are formal because it's by the external party. Fine. It's your customer. Fine. And third parties are highly high on the formality basically. Fine. So in the first party audit, probably you may not have this much of the details. Fine. But this is generally the entire audit planning and execution is. So in the audit planning, we define the audit scope, criteria, and objective. And then we identify who are the resources we need to allocate, means who are the auditors, fine, who we need to assign for this particular scope, objective, and criteria. And then we define the audit plan. Okay, in what date, what time, what location, what business function I will do the audit. Fine. This is communicated with the auditees. Fine. If it is a certification audit, this will be communicated with the auditee organization. Fine. If it is an internal audit, you will communicate this with that department, that we will do the audit on this date, this time, for this particular business process. Then Opening meetings are generally makes this audit more formal. Fine, this for the form. Sorry, for the formal. Fine, and the certification bodies for opening meeting is mandatory. Fine, for the second party audit, this is generally happens because whenever somebody comes to your organization, your customer is coming, you will greet them, you will have the introduction round, and you will set the pace for the entire day. Fine. But for the internal audit, this sometimes is skipped if the audit scope is very small. Fine. So where we have the introduction of the auditee and auditors, fine. In the internal audits, this may be skipped because you're part of the same organization. Probably you know each other very well. Then confirming the scope, objective, and criteria, that is already communicated part of the audit plan. Fine. And confirming the audit plan and timings, that is already agreed. Fine. In the internal audit, fine. Okay, this date, this time, I'll do the audit for this particular function. Fine. In the formal audits, we re-emphasize this is the scope, objective, and criteria, and this is the plan that will follow. If there's any last minute changes, please let us know so that we can adjust the plan and there's no hiccups when we do the audit actually. So then we do the audit activities. During the audit activities, we take interviews of the people, we do the documentation review, we also see how the controls are implemented. That's observation. Then if there are multiple auditors involved, then there is a auditors sync up with themselves. Fine, audit team discuss, consolidate findings, finalize what the findings are, how many NCs, how many observations are coming out from the audit, and then we present those findings as a part of the closing meeting to the auditee organization. Fine, we present those findings, we seek clarification, any feedback, any extra additional information they can provide. Fine, and to address that, fine, probably something might be not understood correctly, they may have some more evidences they can present. This is their opportunity. Fine, so mostly in the closing meeting, auditors does not take up any additional evidences, but this is up to the auditor only. Fine, auditor are also humans, they can also misunderstand something, they may also skip something, so there should be a chance given to the auditee as well. If there's some additional information they can supply, if they don't agree with your findings, they may say probably you misunderstood, this is the facts and this is the evidence, so then you should consider that. And then you agree upon, okay, how the report means, how many NCs are there, how many observations are there, you agree upon it, and you also say, okay, in what time you will release the audit report. Then audit report, you draft the audit report, you do the internal quality review as a certification body for the audit report, and then you communicate the audit report to the your auditee. Right? Then auditees will take the corrective action based on the NCs you have identified. Fine, they will remediate those NCs, and they will again ask you to validate if now the NCs are closed, and this final sign off to close that audit exercise. Right? So this is the entire cycle of the audit. Then when it comes to the certification audits, fine, so every organization will have their own procurement process and a selection process. Fine, selection based on the quality, based on the cost, based on the availability. Fine, you will have your own procurement process. Many of the procurement functions, they ask for 3 quotations and all this comparison and all. Fine, so you will engage the certification body basically. The certification body, once it is finalized and engaged, they will do the stage 1 audit. Fine, stage 1 audit is they will check the readiness, whether you have the policy in place, policies approved. Fine, you have done the internal audit, you have done the 1 round of management review meeting. Fine, all this they will check. They will see whether you have the minimum controls in place or not, so that they can plan for the site visit. Fine, in the stage 2, this is a detailed audit. This is site visit where they will come and they will do the audit and will see how effective your implementation of PIMS is. And finally, they will give a report, and if in the report you have any corrective actions to be taken care of, and that you will do the root cause analysis, and then you will implement those corrective actions. Any questions? Okay. Then in the certification cycle, when you get certified, you get certificate. ISO certification are valid for 3 years. In the first year, you get certified. In the second year, they will come for a small audit to see whether you continue to maintain that controls. Right? In the third year, again, they will come and they will see whether you continue to maintain the controls, maintain the PIMS. Fine. In the fourth year, fine, because the certification was given to you for 3 years. In the fourth year, they will do the recertification audit. Means the complete thorough audit will be conducted again, so that you can get certified for next 3 years. In the next 3 years, again they will follow the same cycle. In the year 5, year 6, there will be a short audit. In the year 7, because now 2 cycles of certification has been expired, so they will have the recertification. Right? This is how the certification works. Then coming to how to address the non-conformities. If there is any non-conformities identified as a part of the audit, then you have to identify the root cause. Right? So identify the root cause. Don't simply just make a quick fix. Identify what is the actual reason why this happened. Right? We'll take an example of connecting the root cause. And then take the corrective action, define the corrective action plan, and assign the action items to your team members or to your different business functions that who need to address those concerns. And then you have to track all those action items to the closure so that you can be sure of all the non-conformities has been addressed. Now, this is the example of connecting the root cause analysis. So this is the most common method how people do the root cause analysis, and most simplistic method as well, the 5 why technique. Fine. So 5 why technique, if you are able to read from the slides, there's a incident that person has slipped and is been hurt. Fine. So the question is, why did the person slip? Fine. So because there was a water on the floor. Fine. Why there was a water on the floor? Because the faucet was leaking. This means we are asking 5 whys. This is the first why. This is the second why. Fine. Third why, fourth why, and fifth why. So at max in the 5 whys, you get all your answers. Fine. 99.999% cases, you will get the answers in the 5 whys. But nobody's stopping you to ask the 6th why, 7th why. Fine. But in majority of the cases, in the 3 why, you will get the answer. Fine. It's rarely you have to go to the 5 whys. Because the things are very apparent when you ask the question, and the first why, second why, by the time you ask the third why, fine, generally, fine, you are able to make up the root cause of the particular non-conformity or the incident. Fine. So that is, but the principle, the technique says in the 5 whys you will get all your answers. Fine. So first why is, why did the person slip? Because there was a water on the floor. Why there was water on the floor? Faucet was leaking. Why the faucet was leaking? Because there was the internal parts were failed. Fine. Why it was not replaced, fine, on time? Because it was not inspected for 2 years. Why it was not inspected for 2 years? Because there was no maintenance plan for this. Fine. So basically, if you include the faucets into your maintenance plan, then the faucets will be reviewed, inspected at a set frequency. If it is being inspected set frequency, any worn out parts you will replace on time. If you replace the worn out parts on time, there will not be any leaking incident. Fine. If there is no leaking incident, there will not be any second case of person slipping over the water. Fine, because of the water. Fine. That's the 5 why principle. Then the last session is about the somebody asked about the question about the individual certifications. So there are 2 individual certifications basically. One is the lead auditor and the lead implementer. Fine. Depending upon which side of the table you want to sit. Lead auditor is basically you get all the rights, all the qualification, and all the knowledge to conduct the audit of the 27701. While the lead implementer focuses on implementing these controls in the organization. Fine. Generally in the organizations, fine, a lead implementer may be just a recommendation by the management that somebody had to have a lead implementer, so that has the right skills to be able to implement the program in the organization. Fine. But the lead implementer does not give you any added qualification to carry out a particular job. Fine. So if you have the understanding, you can do it. But to conduct this audit as a part of certification body, you have to have a lead auditor certification. Fine. So basically, lead auditor program is giving you an extra qualification to work as an auditor as well. Fine. Which is missing otherwise. Means if you don't have a lead auditor qualification, if you lead implementer qualification, fine, you will not be given the opportunity to work as an auditor for the certification body. Fine. But generally in the organizations, if you have the lead auditor or lead implementer, fine, in both cases you are given the opportunity to work and implement the to basically work and implement the privacy information management system in the organization. Means they understand that you know the standard. Fine. So you generally get the job. Right. So, but yes, the learning you have, for example, if you're totally new to this domain, then you go for lead implementer. Fine. If you are already having a fair idea about 27001 or the privacy the data privacy requirements, then you can directly go for 270 the lead auditor program.